It's Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is the GeekNights Book Club. Tonight, the night is short. Walk on, girl. I guess I should say the author's name. By Tomihiko Morimi. So yeah, it's the GeekNights Book Club. We're actually doing these at a reasonable pace.
And we don't pick a book that's 1,000 pages long.
We don't climb the tower that is the Tale of Genji.
Yeah, when we don't pick one book that's actually like 7 to 14 books combined into one book.
But also, you know, we've traveled a lot. It's interesting.
Like we did Wheel of Time. Imagine if we did. No. The book club book is the whole thing.
I mean, I read the whole thing pretty quick.
Yeah, I did not. I stopped at a reasonable point.
There's a number of things we could unpack about the fact that I read the entire Wheel of Time kind of faster at a much faster rate.
The only one thing we need to unpack is that anytime we read any kind of series, Rim will then proceed to read the entire series.
It just happens whether I want to or not.
I should find a series. I should just do like Hardy Boys, the first ever.
I read...
Or Nancy Drew,
I might have read almost all of the Hardy Boys books. I was really into those as a kid. I also read...
Aren't there hundreds of them?
I read a lot of Hardy Boys.
All right, we'll do like Babysitter's Club. There's probably like 1,000 of them.
I only read a couple of those. I didn't read all the Boxcar Children either.
Or what's that one that they sell in the romance section at the the drugstore that's always like letters of the alphabet, like A is for this and B is for whatever.
I'm not sure if I know what you're talking about or if my brain made up a memory of seeing those.
What is the longest by number of books book series? Yeah, Hardy Boys, there is what they're saying, like 190 something.
All right, I doubt I read
all of them. If you add all the different series together, it's like 400.
So when I was a kid, one of our bookshelves, I wonder, I might have an old picture of it. We had like an entire shelf just dedicated to the Hardy Boys and another shelf that had the like later, newer Hardy Boys books, which were kind of edgelordy and stupid. But what do you want? I was like 11.
There are also 41 Discworld books. We could do that.
I can only think of one novel I ever started reading. It was a series of 3 novels, but they were condensed into one giant hardcover. And it's the only book of real length I ever started reading, made it significantly into, and then just decided to not continue and give up on and never read. And that was Dragon's Gold, Serpent's Silver, Chimera's Copper. I don't know how those books end, nor do I care.
I don't know how you can say the name of it without tongue twisting or remembering what the title even is.
This is how much I despised those books. Kind of like how the worst movie I've ever watched to completion on purpose remains Clifford with Martin Short playing a 10-year-old boy.
Okay.
So, The Night is Short, Walk On Girl. Now, if you're new to the GeekNights Book Club, somehow, we read the book and it's a book club. That means we are assuming you, dear listener, have read the book. So if you have not read the book, The Night is Short, Walk On Girl, or at least watch the movie that we also reviewed that is also titled The Night is Short, Walk On Girl, then you're not going to know what we're talking about, and we're going to ruin everything about this book. Like, spoilers, just read the book. We're not going to summarize the entire plot for you. This is going to be a conversation among people who have read this book. And also,
so the first thing you got to know is about this author, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know too much about them. But I know
what I know is every piece of media they have been involved in that I have encountered so far, I have loved. And as a result, I feel like I should read all of their books. There aren't even that many.
Right. So basically, it's like we saw, various anime from Science Saru, such as Tatami Galaxy,
Penguin Highway.
Right. And the Tatami Time Machine Blues, which is newer.
Eccentric Family.
Right. Well, Eccentric Family is not from Science Saru.
True,
but
it's a show.
It is still an anime that is based on the novels of this person. So it's like, wow, this person keeps having their novels adapted into anime quite a bit, and all of those anime are like fantastic for some reason. So clearly the novels must be good, and that was why I gave Rim a choice between like, hey, a novel by this person or the novel the new Miyazaki movie was based on.
It was hard to pass this one up, especially because The Night is A walk-on girl, the night is short. I always say it the opposite way, like I kind of randomly say, but it's the night is short, walk-on girl. That movie really stuck with me. Like, that was a fantastic film. I had a lot to say about it. We reviewed it. We did a pretty long review of it some years ago on Geek Nights. And if I had to summarize what struck me about that movie, other than its visual style, it was that despite being written essentially about Japanese college students, it felt so true to the spirit of my experience as an American college student in very particular ways. And it just it just really spoke to me in my life and how I've lived up to this point, and people I have known. Like, I watched that movie and now I read this book, and there's a lot of people in these books or in this book that I can think, yeah, that's like this person I knew. That's like Katsu. That's like whatever. Like, there's these characters that they're the larger than life archetypes of the
Katsu's
people.
the underwear guy.
Yeah, 100%, 1,000%.
But yes, I mean, Tomihiko Morimi is only a few years older than us, right? And basically, they went to college. They went to Kyoto University, and a lot of the books they write are either are set in Kyoto or, and this one, Kyoto and Kyoto University. So it's like they're explicitly writing about their own college days in a fantastical kind of way, and so if you have sort of a similar university experience, then that's going to speak to you because they're speaking about the same thing that they had.
And it really did speak to me. I mean, like, just reading this book really brought it back. But the one big difference, and we'll stop talking about the movie because we're all, authors, God is dead, other works are dead. We're only talking about the book. But a big difference is the movie portrays everything that happens in this book as basically occurring in one crazy night, like all the way through to the end.
Not
and then there's
not
sort of
entirely.
Well, then there's the denouement, like the final sickness story in the winter. But this book is...
I mean, yeah, the movie, it sort of feels like it's one crazy night because they don't do a great job of like letting you know, like, whole season later, right?
Yep.
It just sort of keeps going, right, very quickly without like any sort of indication right? It's
up until the sickness part, where then it does have like a pause in the beat.
Yeah, but it's like were there 4 seasons in one night, or is it just not really breaking between? Whereas in the book, you have 4 chapters, one for each season, 4 seasons in a row, covering the entire school year, right? Ending, starting in the spring and ending in the winter. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's like chapter 1 over, chapter 2 next season, right? And it breaks it up into 4 distinct parts, right? The night of drunkenness, the second one is the
book fair,
and then the school festival, and then and then the plague. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Spring, summer, fall, winter, which I think is important because reading the book, one thing that really struck me is that it very much feels like these are the 4 seasons of coming into adulthood while you're in college, from the naive, I have come to school, the world is my oyster, I can do anything, I'm an invincible god, I'm going to go have a night on the town, to the summer, to the fall, the melancholy. Remember that feeling of leaving campus?
I think it's also that, just in Japan, they common sense have school start when the year starts and school end when the year ends, not like whatever we do in the United States for who knows what reason, where school starts in the autumn. And it's like, it doesn't even make sense. You try to be like, well, back in the day, they were very agrarian. And so the kids had to work the harvest. Well, then why are they starting school at the same time as the harvest? It's like, that's not the reason that we do. I don't know the reason we do it that way in the United States.
I actually don't know either.
It's stupid. And we should change it. I think they should just delay the start of a school year at some point, like 3 months, just to line it up in January,
There's a lot of things we could do to make our schools better. But anyway. I guess the seasons really matter here because winter, the final chapter, really feels like that peak or that trough, a nadir of your life as a college student, that moment when you're becoming an adult for real. Because, we were old, we were above the age of 18 in college, but at the same time, we're all stupid. Like, that's just how you are when you're between 18 and 20 something. And this book just really parallels and highlights some of the ways that people evolve in college and that particular kind of adolescence if they get to experience it.
All right. So in the book, you got the two characters. You got the dude and the girl who's walking on.
Yep.
Right? And the book is told in first person perspective from both of them, and it switches back and forth. So it's like, we've seen books like, say, Prince of Nothing, where it's like, this chapter is looking over here at these characters,
Yep.
and that chapter is looking over at those characters. Or there's a lot of books doing that sort of thing. But this one is like first person character A, first person character B. And these characters don't really directly interact a lot until they do at some points, but very slightly.
Yep.
And then at the end, right? Because it's a typical romance thing where the people aren't together, and then at the end, haha, they're together, right? Okay.
Yep.
But they're interacting a lot with the same other people, right? So it's like they interact with the rich drunken guy with the train. They interact
Yep.
with the bedroom investigation society. They interact with the club fair festival leading guy and the underpants guy. And
Yep.
it's like
But
they're
most
meeting.
importantly, there's the two characters that interact with the most are almost the
Higuchi,
parallels of them.
right?
Mr. Higuchi and Mr. Hanuki. The drunk lady
Hanuki's-
and the
Hanuki-
guy who's
Right.
probably a Tengu.
The Tengu guy who's in all the anime. And it's like they're constantly interacting with the same people, but not each other. And so what happens is, I don't know if happens in the Japanese, obviously. That goes for basically everything because we read a translated book. But you start reading a section because it's not broken. It's like the 4 chapters are for the 4 seasons. So there'll be like a dot you'll be reading, and then there'll be a dot. And it's like the dot means next part, right, of the same chapter, though. We haven't changed seasons yet. And it just sort of starts going in when the first person, like, I was hanging out with at the Speedy Kotatsu, whatever, right? Or, I went into the next bar and Higuchi was there. And it's like, is this character A or character B? All right. And sometimes it's perfectly clear which one it is because you can get a hint of like, I know the other character is currently in this situation.
Yep.
So this can't be them. The dude right now is in like a eating contest of eating like the fire curry or whatever it was. Right. And so this isn't about eating fire curry, and that's not resolved yet. So this is clearly the girl talking right now. But sometimes it's not entirely clear, and nothing in that section like definitively, like, and most of the time it does, but there are a few times where it's not 100. You could bet on one over the other, but it's not 100% guaranteed that was the character.
Yeah, it might be the
That
translation a bit, in that the tone felt the same whenever
right,
they would
because they just
introduce.
come in, like, start narrating, like, I walked into the woods. It's like, who are you? Right?
I'm glad that wasn't just me, because I, at least 10 times reading this book, would be steamrolling through, and then I'd have to back up a couple of paragraphs, like, wait, that's the girl. Okay,
Right.
okay.
And it's not, they don't do, right, the strict alternating. It doesn't go 100% back and forth. There are times I checked where it's like, same character, dot, same character still, right? Just stepped on to the next part of the story or whatever. So you can't just rely on some alternation, like in, what was the love one we did, the book with the the Time War, right?
Oh yeah,
was
How
it
to
a-
Lose the Time War?
Yeah, where also I couldn't tell the characters apart, but that one was strictly alternating,
Mm.
right? Here they're not strictly alternating.
But at least in this case, the tone was the same in terms of how it was written, again with the caveat that the translation might have colored that to some degree. The outlook and the way the characters perceive the same events and interact with the world couldn't be more different. Like, you really don't super like the guy, and the girl is just like charming and cute all the time with almost no exceptions. Like, the guy's not bad, he's not evil, but he is, I would describe him as stupid in the way that a lot of guys in college tend to be.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about the guy is like he is, he's not like just a bad dude, like a evil bro or a sleazy person or or that guy, right? But he is, since you're getting his inner monologue, right? He's sort of exposing to you, the reader, all his dark inner thoughts, which are kind of realistic for a dude that age, right? Or at least, I had those kinds of thoughts at times in my life, right? And he's like having like these introspective like arguments with himself, like, you know, at some points later in the book where he's like, do I even like this girl? Is like, am I just a pervert? You know, he's like, well, you know, I do have those thoughts, but also these other things, right? It's like, you know, but doesn't everybody? Or it's like, is that okay? Is it not okay? What, you know, he's not just like, you know, an actual evil person would have been like, you know, like not thinking those things, right? And so it's like that sort of makes him more sympathetic than in the movie, where, you know, you see the way like his in the movie, you can see like his body language and his personality, and it's sort of like, get this guy out of here.
Yeah, but especially because without all that introspection, the movie really just, the girl is so great, and you're just like, why is she ending up with this putz? What's going on? The book really makes it more clear that they did actually have a lot in common, and there is a lot more going on in the broader world of how they're connected to each other, etc. But that really just didn't come through in the movie. In the movie, I just didn't want that guy to be around.
Yeah, the movie, they definitely seemed more like somebody stalking / having a crush on someone from afar. Whereas in the book, it's like, you know, clearly it's like they're in this club together. They don't name what club that is. They talk about every other club, right? But they are in a club together. It's like they, you know, they meet all the, you know, frequently, but that's partly intentional due to stalking. But somehow he does a non-creepy stalking, which they use the metaphor of like filling in the moat. Right? It's like, because on the one hand, he's too cowardly to just ask a girl out.
Which, but as a guy who was in college, we've all been there.
Oh yeah, that's just normal, right? You know, so he's too cowardly to ask a girl out, which is relatable. But at the same time, he is conscientious enough to not want to, like, you know, harass and you know, barge through the front door of the castle, right, and be a bad dude, right? He wants to make sure that there is some sort of, at least some confirmation of a reciprocal feeling before he does anything, right? So the metaphor uses that he's filling in the moat, right? It's like, I don't have to go, you know, swimming across the water and attack like a barbarian. If the moat is filled in, then I can walk into the castle casually.
But he's also really approaching it in that naive way as an outsider, instead of just like making a human connection and talking to this person.
Well, I think is that, you know, the argument, at least that's made towards the end of the book, is that, yeah, he did have this sort of weird approach that was somewhat stalkery and uncomfortable due to his cowardice and whatnot, but also somehow his moat filling did create some moments of connection, right? They were just very brief, but they still were remembered by both people later, right? It's like, oh, I'm actually going to go on a date with this person now, actually, right? Oh, what will we talk about? Well, you know, they're both curious about how the other person's night went when they were all drunk. You know, they're both curious about what happened at the book fair, right? So they do have those things that he did. You know, he was thinking about her. He went and ate the hottest curry to get the book for her.
But they also
right?
they didn't remember, like, especially her,
acts.
didn't remember like completely in a vacuum. Part of that memory was being prompted by the fact that these two had interacted with all these other people. And then the cold at the end really brings together, like, oh, everyone is connected in this college. Like, this is an environment that people live in. And people don't exist in a vacuum. They're coming together, and these coincidences were partly through the network of all the other people they know.
Yep. And if you think about in the real world, I feel like the people I know who have relationships, a lot of the best relationships were people who had that level of connection with each other prior, right? Where it's like, you know, I think about people who are like best friends, like super close since they were young. It's like, that can work out, right? But you know, it's a little weird, right? It's
but like you see this person,
but it's like, or like a
often.
complete distant stranger, right? It's like, but it's like, oh, you know, I'm friends with so-and-so, you're friends with your so-and-so's cousin, right? And then we meet at a wedding, right? There was a wedding meeting at the start of this book, right? It's like, that's the most common kind of distance that people have, where there is a common thing for them to discuss, and they do share, you know, some part of the world with each other. not complete strangers. But they're not super close. They already know everything about each other. That would make a relationship awkward. And these two characters are portrayed as having that exact amount of connection, even though you may not realize it until, later on.
So one thing that really struck me was that of all the side characters, which are great, like I've never read a book that so well portrayed what it feels like to be in a college and have like the cast of weirdos that are in the periphery of your social circles. Like, it reminded me a lot of how we felt and acted around like RIT anime and RWAG, and like, oh, that's the weird guy where there's a mythology around him. Like, everyone has a mythology, but the book, bit by bit, as you get even a little bit closer to any of these mythological characters, the more real they become. Like, you see the reality, like Rihaku is this old man, and you get a much more balanced portrayal of him. Ms. Hanuki, like, she's this legendary semi-magical drunk, but now she works in a dentist's office, and she's just an older woman, and like, you kind of mythologized her because you'd never really interacted with adults before, college kid. Not on that level. And similarly, think about RIT, the mythology of running RIT anime. But the reality was we were a bunch of nerds, ran a club for a little while, and that was that. Like, there wasn't anything that special. There's someone there who's probably similar to how I was and similar to how you were, and they got their katsu just like we had our katsu.
Yeah, there was I highlighted something, but of course I left my ebook in the other room.
Same. I highlighted a few lines that I'll have to try to remember because I don't have it open.
Let me see if I can get it in the cloud version.
But I guess while you pull that up, the character, what struck me the most is that Mr. Higuchi, the Tengu guy, was very much a parallel of the main character, the guy, in the same way that Ms. Hanuki was very much a parallel of the girl main character. And in the first chapter, they really felt almost like, on one hand, through the adolescent eyes interacting with an adult, like, oh, how cool is this guy? Like having this crazy night and doing cool stuff in the bars. But you get a little older and you realize, like, oh, that guy's just kind of poor and shabby, and he's a cool guy, but he's not magic. And meanwhile, like, oh, Miss Hanuki, she's so elegant with her cocktail. Nah, she's just kind of a middle-aged drunk. Like, don't think that she's more than that. But the characters also almost saw them through the lens of how they idealize themselves as adults in some ways. Because the guy definitely, like, was very much into philosophy and very much into, like, solving problems different ways. Like, you could see him almost imagining in the hot pot contest, like, I wish I were a Tengu and I could use magic to win it instead of this bullshit of having to eat this bad food. And the girl drinking her cocktails is seeing her as, wow, I wish I could be that elegant, sneaking into a party, everyone loves me, I know my way through the world like this. And they're almost like following in the footsteps of these adults, but they're following their mythological idealized version of these adults they met.
Yeah. So the thing that I highlighted, right, was talking about the school festival, and it's and it says, what were they trying to impart to people at the booths, in the lecture halls, and on the stage? They displayed an excess of free time and futile enthusiasm, and there was nothing whatsoever interesting about that to outsiders. In other words, it was none other than despicable raw youth, right? And so that's what's on display in this book, right, is that sort of youth where it's not the youth of children, right? But it's the youth of not an adult yet.
Yep.
And so, you think about, things that you do in your life around that time for some reason, I guess, I don't know of all people, but at least for us and Tomihiko Morimi.
Anyone who was lucky, wealthy, whatever enough to go to a proper college.
It might happen outside of colleges too. But,
definitely. But there'd be a different flavor of it. But this is so specifically highlighting that university style of careless youth.
But it's not just the people around that time in your life that can sort of have a mythological, right, kind of, aura, but also the events, right? It's like that time we played BattleTech down in the basement. It's like we played BattleTech in a basement. There was nothing really
Anime
magical.
Music Night was like this legendary night that would happen a couple times a year. But if you took a photograph of an anime music night or showed someone who was not inside that environment what music night was actually like, they would not see a mythology. They would see a bunch of nerds in a room listening to anime music.
Right. It's just, it's for some reason people will be like, oh, remember, even when they are adults, they'll say, remember that time this thing happened, that
Yep.
crazy drunken night in, around town.
Yep.
Remember that book fair? Remember that school festival with the elephant butt? It's like,
And you get the
oh,
thread.
those are the times. And then you can't think of any of those times in your recent life.
Oh no.
Because you're looking at, even though you might be doing things that are that level or even beyond that level, they don't take on that sort of aura. It's just like, that time we went to, I don't know, a fancy restaurant. It's like, yeah, we went to a fancy restaurant. But
Yep. Or me bumming around Turkey for months as a job, getting into weird situations. That I was very mythological, but yet it looms equally large in my personal memory to like that one particular club night where like the most people showed up and I almost won the DDR tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Almost. I didn't actually win. But also like the structures, the school itself, like the fact that like the clock tower is there and he acknowledges it a lot and mentions it a lot and talks to it when he's walking by, felt a lot like me looking at that one sculpture on campus every day, like walking over to go to class or whatever. Like there's just something magical about that kind of environment. And I don't think it's just youth. I think it's that it's the time in the life of someone who has that experience where you have the most possibilities in front of you, but you are also adult enough to be taking real actions independently. You're living independently. You're the master of your own domain. Your decisions are your own, but you also haven't been crushed by the world yet. You don't have any real responsibilities yet. And everything you do is like your currency is idle time.
I think it's also that in that kind of space, the way people are defined, right? So I think about this a lot where it's like you look at a person, it's like Joey Jojo, and it's like, all right, if you have to write a 1-sentence bio for Joey Jojo's social media profile, right? Well, a lot of people will put their job.
Yep.
A lot of people will put, if the people have created something, right? They're a founder, they're an artist, right? They'll put the thing that they made. If the person is like, has really not done much, they're going to put the thing that they like consume. Like I'm a Star Wars fan, right? The things that they enjoy will define who they are as people, right? I play this video game, that defines me, right? And so once you're like, an adult out of college, you sort of are going to have probably a job or a thing you've made that is the thing that defines you, right? But before then, right, what defines you is not any of that, right? It's like, there's 100 people in the same, engineering major.
Yep.
And it's like, right, you're not defining people by like, so-and-so the engineering major.
Yeah, I didn't even know anyone in my major except Katsu and like
right. Is you're saying, that weird guy who always wears the Viking hat, right?
Yep.
Or it's like that guy who, is always, as the fancy camera guy,
yep.
right? Or,
if anyone wrote that one sentence about me at RIT, that's that weird guy with the mustache who runs RIT, who runs the anime club.
Right. It's like people have, some sort of other weird, quirky, almost, thing that defines them. That is the kind of thing that you would only see for like characters in a novel or a movie. And you don't really see too much among, if you go to work, you think about your coworkers. I don't think about any of those people in that way. Right. It's like, I have a coworker who wears, like, I'm trying to think of my coworkers. There's one who has like, their glasses are like a somewhat outlandish style, right? Not a typical normal style eyeglasses that, they got some wild frames, wilder than normal, right? But do I think about them as person with the wild glasses? Not really. They aren't like a legendary character.
That guy hasn't changed his underwear in 7 months. You remember that.
Right, it's like underwear guy.
Yeah.
Hey, or you go when you go to conventions, we see a little bit of that, right? It's like
Banana Maraca.
Banana Maraca. It's like there's a guy like who's like a sort of taken on an aura of being Banana Maraca, or line management hat feather guy.
Yep. Well, I think part of it because PAX, like conventions, are micro spaces, brief moments in space and time that are very similar to that youthful excess of individual identity that we get in college. Like when you're at a MagFest, people who wouldn't otherwise be remarkable in broader society are wearing a weird costume, or are the Spot It guy who wanders around playing Spot It with people, or like it lets you relive that. And if you never lived it, then I think that's why a convention might be a very important space for you, because that's where you can be what you want to be in the sense that these identities are not just how you see yourself, nor are they just how other people see you. Something about the way these mythological identities are portrayed in this book feels very real to college. It's sort of mutual and consensual. Like, people would know, oh, Rim, that's the weird guy with the mustache who runs RIT Anime. But I thought of myself as, I'm going to be the fucking weird guy who runs RIT Anime. Like, I wanted that identity. I reveled in that identity. Underpants Guy in the book reveled in that identity.
Well, I also think, when we look at the internet, the social media, it's like the older internet had more of that going on, right?
Oh, yeah.
When you made a GeoCities page, you were that Flaming Skull guy or Chowder Man, right? Whereas on the social medias we have today, you are you. You are who you are. And it's only in certain, still cool online spaces, like maybe a VR chat kind of place, or a NeoCities, or strange Discords, or people with video VTubers, right? Where you're some kind of caricature or character, but that even though it's a character or a front, it might actually be more true to who you are.
Well, because I think it's an
right?
uninhibited trueness of self, and society in much of the world, but especially in the United States and Japan in the modern era, does not give you a lot of safety, freedom, or space to live that identity. Like, I can't be the way I was at RIT Anime at work, even though I am very much still like that in real life, in person most of the time. But I said real life as opposed to work. Very few people have a lot of time in their lives post-college where they can be that way for a lot of reasons. And I think you and I have made a point of trying to keep that as strong as possible. But even then, like, a lot of my social media is very mercenary. Like, even we get battered down by society. We can't be the fully realized weirdos that we were in college, that we probably would be if there was more slack in our society.
Yeah. But when you think about, the media that we consume, particularly the anime and the mangas, right? A lot of them create, fantasy novels also, sci-fi novels. They create these worlds inhabited by people like that. Even in this novel, right? There are characters who appear very briefly, right? Like guy who runs the koi fishing pond.
Yep.
Right? And it's like...
Rudy. I imagine him as Rudy. That's it.
Yeah. But it's like they're sort of like these special people who have like a certain, light on them in a unique and fun character kind of way, and not just a person that is uninteresting, right?
And the thing is, one thing I think is very important is some people misinterpret this as, I think in college you'll see the people who have the light shining on them, and you kind of assume that all the people who don't stand out are just boring. But I think something this book portrays really well is that the reality is at the cold scene at the end, like the sequence of who got the cold from whom. There's all these different networks in a place like a college where to someone else, there's a different set of people who have the light shining on them. And the groups of people who intersect will build their own mythologies, but they're not all the same. Like, everyone's got that story, unless they're really sad in college. Oh, God, my life is great now. Like, I'm not going to complain about it, but there's a reason why so many people say, "Oh, college was the best days of my life." Like,
right.
I think
except for the whole studying part. Notice they don't do any of the school studying parts in the book.
Scott, right? But you didn't study much. I didn't study. We didn't go to class.
But if you think about the amount of time spent, going to classes and all those things, right? It was the least memorable part, but it was significant number of the hours.
Yeah, more or less so for me, because I really didn't go to class ever.
It depends.
Yeah,
but
it was part of the identity I had in college. Was everyone knew how is Riv here, because I never went to class, and it didn't seem like I was ever doing anything.
But yeah, I mean, this is technically, I guess, a light novel, right? I don't know if we've read anything else for the book club that counts as a light novel. It's like, I guess it's not really a distinction that they make so much in the United States. It's really something that came over through, it was a thing in Japan, and then because anime fans, people found out the term sort of carried over as like this novels that are quicker and easier to read, but are not necessarily like, novellas where they're, there's somehow lesser than, right? If you think about like, we read Binti, which was short, but I guess it was 3 parts.
Well, we also did way back in like 2010, 2011, Golden Apples of the Sun, which is a collection of short stories.
No, that's an anthology. That's not a light novel.
Yeah, but we did it in the book club. Because I think we did.
Yeah, but it's not even related anyway.
Well, I was in terms of categorizing, like the book club isn't specific to novels.
No, it's not at all. It can be. We could do nonfiction. I just don't like to read nonfiction.
I plan to introduce a nonfiction book at some point, but I'm holding off for a bunch of reasons.
It's difficult. It's not like I enjoy the learning of nonfiction, but it's hard to get through.
I'll point out the listener has called out that one of the mythological features of their college was Cutco Dave, a true weirdo.
There you go. That's right. That person knows exactly what the fuck we're talking about.
Yep.
And this book is all about that.
Yep. Cutco Dave and Damn It Dwayne are the same type of legend.
We had Damn It Dwayne.
We had Damn It Dwayne.
And we had a lot of like that. Duck Boy, all kinds of people.
But it's just this book. This book portrayed it so well, and I do feel like if their society were more like college in that, what are the attributes of the place that this book portrays? People are struggling and have work and like they still have responsibilities, but the responsibilities are not as dire as a lot of people have. Like you can fail and it's fine for the most part. You have a lot of free time. It says free time and feudal enthusiasm. Yep. It says it right there in the book. I highlighted it. But you're also in a very close-knit, walkable environment. You're not locked away in cars far away from each other.
Right. Well, I think in Japan in general, there's still cars there. It seems more walkable everywhere than in the United States. But I think another thing that you can't overlook in the importance of all of Morimi's work is the importance of Kyoto, right? So obviously I've never been there.
I've been there.
Yeah, but having seen so many of it, the anime, and reading this book, at least, it's like, I feel like I learned a lot of things about it. And the Morimi includes so many Kyoto things as recurring themes throughout all the works. It's like the electric railway and the electric brandy and other electric things.
Well, overlapping with the magical realism of Morimi's works, which are a big part of this book too.
The magical book fair, the god of book fairs.
I just love magical realist Kyoto. Like like if the real world had dangerous Oni guy who lives in a triple-decker train that occasionally shows up and is possibly dangerous, but people get on that train anyway because something cool will happen. I'd be on that. I'd be looking for that train every night.
But it's like, it sort of adds that extra special something, whereas in our life, we had Hoagie Steve, who was just a guy.
Yeah. But what if we had...
Who knows what they're doing right now? But if our lives are a Morimi novel, Hoagie Steve would actually be a sandwich wizard for real. Yep. Kind of. Questionably, like, how did they eat that many sandwiches? Like, how did she drink that much alcohol and not die? Right? It's like, it wouldn't be straight up magic like fucking Merlin the Wizard, but it would still be like, no way anyone eats that many sandwiches. It's impossible, right? But Hoagie Steve pulled it off.
Yep. This would be more, it'd be more like, yeah, pretty sure that guy's a tanuki.
Like real life, Mitch drank a bunch of milk and got sick because that's what would happen.
Yeah.
In the book, Mitch becomes a cow. I don't know. Something like that, right? You hear a mysterious moo. Where did that come from?
But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed reading this book. Even having like the movie's great, the book's great. I kind of want to watch the movie again now that I've read the book.
I think that the thing that I also enjoy is just in the movie, there's sort of like this narration that comes in. It actually happens in Tatami Galaxy also a lot, where the character is talking and narrating from the first person perspective, like in this really rapid fire voice, right? And so when I started reading the book, I was reading it in that sort of voice, and it was going way too fast. But I managed to like slow it down at least, so that it's like the when the influence of the anime stopped infecting my reading. But even though the speed I was able to erase and get a grip on, the sort of tone and phrasing was like captured very well. So I don't know if the animes and this book had the same translators, but if whoever did translate it, they were definitely on the same page. And so clearly that must be, the fact that all the different works have that coming through in the translation tells me it must be in the original text as well. That sort of, that same tone of, this sort of wild prose, right? Using like these ridiculous analogies for things and.
So one other little theme that stood out to me was that we see several occurrences, one of the clubs like having fake rivalries with each other, which again, totally true to real life. RIT Anime and RWAG, there was nothing we actually could fight about, but we kind of made up reasons to fight with each other for fun. Like that's just kind of how college went. But also it portrays the adults, the people who have left college. They maintain that thread back. And I always think to the scene in the first chapter where the old members of the Sophistry Club encounter the current members of the Sophistry Club.
And then the sophists are there at the end as well.
Yep. Imagine if you, me, and Ad, like all the people who were like in that era of RIT Anime happened to be in a bar or a restaurant like somewhere, and we bumped into the current e-board of RIT Anime. Like, it would be just like that.
That's happened.
Yeah, it has happened. It's happened many times. And every time it's happened, it has been an absolute social treasure to me. But two, the book definitely makes it clear that those threads are how you maintain a degree of happiness in your life. Like you don't want to live in the past, but you want to maintain that little thread because occasionally you can tug on that thread and be pulled back for a brief moment into what it was like in the year 2001 when you were like trying to join the e-board of a club in college.
Well, it's also interesting how, the Sophistry Club is like the first one that sort of comes in, and it's sort of, they always talk about, my clubmate, but they never say what club they're in. It doesn't seem to be the Sophistry Club. It's some unnamed club. But the Sophistry Club is like there throughout, and even not only is it there throughout the book, whereas the other clubs might only appear briefly, but everyone's always engaging in sophistry, whether they're in the club or not.
I was going to make the argument that in college, at least for us, every club was a sophistry club, effectively.
Exactly. It's like when we had the free time and feudal enthusiasm, we did a lot of sophistry, nonstop sophistry.
And I miss that. I
nowadays,
miss having the free time to do that.
A lot less sophistry these days. A lot more real answers to real problems, etc.
Which you sort of get at the end of this book. Like the winter chapter is partly about moving beyond that mythology into some more specific realities.
Oh, they did have They have a magical cure for the disease and a magical tornado and stuff like that.
So yeah, it's funny because I was reading through some reviews on Goodreads of this book just to see what other people have thought ahead of this.
Interesting.
And what was fascinating to me is they seem to break into three types of reviews that I'm going to broadly characterize. Type 1 is a lot like what we said, like an introspective and inspective analysis of the themes and morals of the book, and etc. People who are just like, oh, it was just like college. Oh my God, this really brought me back. And people who were reductive and angry about it. And they seemed to, like, there were a few reviewers of people who were like, that's not what it's like. Like that was just some kids like following drunk people around and having like seeing the world through stupid child eyes, and they didn't get anything. And other people who seemed to just react strongly to the fact that they didn't experience things like that, and they couldn't relate to anything that happened in the book at all. And I know some of our friends who didn't go to RIT with us when we watched the movie. I do remember some of them really bounced off of the movie. Like they did not have an experience like that in their adolescence the way we did.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't, especially, it's not an experience of certain kinds of people who might be sheltered, people who might be unfortunate, people who might not, go to some place that has a lot of people, right? It's not an experience you have in a quieter place. Even in a quieter place, there might be characters, but there'll be fewer of them, right? It's really just a certain kind of experience that a certain kind of life has. Many lives, but also not many lives.
Yeah.
It's not a universal thing for all humans.
Yep. But at least for our group, I'm thinking of someone, a different Scott in particular, the bits of the specific nature of a dude that age pining after a girl that he won't ask out is so specific to one of our friends that was...
I think it's specific to a lot of people.
I think it is specific to a lot of people. I think we all experienced that. It's just one of our friends experienced it to the highest degree of anyone I've ever known, including myself.
Perhaps.
So, yeah, I feel like I gotta read the rest of the works by this author, especially because Eccentric Family is one of my favorite anime, like, ever.
That's a good one.
I feel like we can stop there. We've gone almost 50 minutes on book club alone. Unless we got any final thoughts, we can just stop there.
No. All right. So